Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being with us today. My name is Ravina Advani, and I head up BNP Paribas' Low Carbon Transition Group for the Americas region. Global energy transition momentum is taking off in unimaginable ways. We saw energy transition capital spending exceed $1 trillion last year, surpassing fossil fuels for the first time ever. Corporate sustainability commitments are at an all-time high. We're also seeing clean energy policy making really scale and grow nascent technologies. And governments around the world are making bold strides in helping decarbonize their economies. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by these esteemed panelists that will help us explore the feasibility of resolving the energy trilemma, which is delivering reliable energy that is clean and affordable for all. Please join me in welcoming, I'll start with you, James Scongack, Chief Development Officer and Executive VP of Operational Services at Bruce Power. Bob Blue, the Chair, President, CEO of Dominion Energy. Gary Rose, Executive VP, Canada Nuclear at AtkinsRéalis, and the President and CEO of Candu Energy. And last but not least, Lisa McBride. She is the Canada lead for SMRs at GE Hitachi Nuclear. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. Let's dive right in. I'd love to just go down the line here and hear from each of you on how your companies are thinking about that pivot from fossil fuels in order to achieve a net zero economy by mid-century. We'll start with you, Gary.
Yeah, for sure. So first and foremost, thanks for having me, and it's very appropriate that we're here in downtown Toronto in the province of Ontario here in Canada. And what I would say is we're not preparing to make the pivot. We have made the pivot to a large degree here in Ontario. So if we go back 15 years in the province of Ontario, a third of our electricity came from coal-fired generation. Today, zero does. 70% of that energy needed to phase coal out came from the work that we are doing at Bruce Power through our Candu units, which I know Gary will be plugging a little bit later. So we have made a tremendous amount of progress in Ontario. So the real goal here in Ontario now is to say, how do we have a fully decarbonized electricity system? How do we reduce the demands for natural gas electricity going forward? But more importantly, how do we build on the clean electricity platform we have in Ontario to decarbonize other areas of our economy? So a lot of people talk about this as a trilemma. I don't see it as a trilemma at all. I think we know what the tools in the toolbox are to decarbonize electricity systems, and it's nuclear, it's hydroelectric, and it's renewables. And using storage and other capabilities and natural gas as a transition fuel, to me, there isn't a trilemma. It's very clear. The issue is there the political will to act on it?
Thank you, Bob.
Great. Thanks, Ravina. Thanks to the Toronto Global Forum for having me here. Just a couple minutes on Dominion Energy. You all may not be familiar with us. We're headquartered in Richmond, Virginia, so I am not Canadian. Maybe you gathered that from my accent. We have about 7 million homes and businesses that we serve with electricity and natural gas, roughly split, 3.5 million electricity, mostly in Virginia and South Carolina, 3.5 million natural gas in Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Ohio, North Carolina, and South Carolina. When I was invited to this, we did not realize that in between the invitation and this event, we would announce that we were selling those natural gas businesses to Enbridge, a great Canadian company. That deal has not closed yet. Regulatory approval still required, but we feel very good about that transaction. We think it's very good for our employees to be part of a great natural gas company. But I'm going to talk a little bit from the perspective of both a provider of electricity and natural gas. Ravina, you basically described the mission of our company, which is to provide reliable, affordable, and increasingly clean energy to power our customers every day. A few things about that mission. It's easy to say. It's hard to do. And it lines up squarely with the clean energy transition, which is something that our company has been leaning into. So if you look back to 2005, we've reduced our carbon emissions in our electric business by 46%. We've reduced methane emissions in our gas business by 38%. We have a net zero goal by 2050. We announced a net zero goal for direct emissions by 2050 3 years ago. And then last year, we expanded that goal to include some sources, the major sources of indirect emissions. So our customers' end use of natural gas, for example. So we've made good progress. We recognize we have more work to do, and we'll talk more about some of those opportunities, but they start with leaning in more to renewable energy. We are building the largest offshore wind farm on this side of the Atlantic Ocean, one that will, when completed at the end of 2026, will have enough electricity to power about 660,000 homes and businesses. So it's pretty good size. We're rapidly expanding our solar portfolio. We're the second largest utility solar portfolio in the United States. We're moving much more into battery storage than we had been before. We recently announced a pilot program for long duration storage, and I'm sure we'll get into that conversation a little bit more. But as we think about the transition to renewables, the intermittent nature of renewables are challenging. Battery storage, lithium-ion batteries, about 4 hours worth of storage. It's dark for more than 4 hours at night. So we need to be able to store energy for longer periods of time, and we're experimenting. We just announced a pilot with a long duration storage battery that's closer to 100 hours, and we'll have to see how that works. And then finally, we need to sort of think about what additional technologies beyond the ones we're already operating. We're going to continue to operate our nuclear fleet, but we're looking at small modular reactors, and I expect we'll have a conversation about that and about hydrogen as well. So the bottom line for us is we need to figure out how we continue to work through the increasingly clean part of our mission while maintaining the reliability and affordability part of our mission. That's where the challenge lies for us. We're very optimistic about our ability to carry it out, and we've got great people to do it, and I look forward to the conversation here this morning.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Again, Gary Rose from AtkinsRéalis. We are an engineering services company. We're 37,000 people strong here in Canada, but do work globally. When it comes to this question about helping others transition to a net zero future, we do that through the work that we do with all of our clients. But our mission is to engineer a better future for our planet and its people. So we do that through the project. So our focus is really on two sectors, clean energy and infrastructure. We've divested ourselves from our oil and gas business. We have a global net zero practice that is helping all of our clients across all of our sectors and markets to help them, whether it be public or private equity firms, companies, et cetera, to help them achieve their net zero goals through the development execution of projects. When it comes to our revenues right now are over 50% of our revenues are related directly to projects that we're working on that are contributing to net zero goals. And those include big projects right here in Ontario. We're partnered with Aecon on the refurbishments and life extensions of the Darlington nuclear plant and the Bruce Power nuclear plant. And these two projects are going extremely well and will provide clean energy to the province of Ontario for 30 plus years upon the completion of those projects. And we're taking on a number of nuclear projects throughout the world, clean energy, battery type projects, all focused on helping our clients achieve a net zero future.
And last but certainly not least, when we think about, the role GE plays, our equipment powers about 30%, uses about 30% of the equipment around the world in 170 countries that we operate in. We're certainly committed strategically to helping the world decarbonize, helping our customers decarbonize, whether it's a trilemma or a dilemma or a policy issue, as James talked about. There's a number of things that we're doing that I think we'll unpack during this discussion. When I think about internally what we're doing, we're committed to achieving carbon neutrality by 2030, and we saw about a 28% reduction between 2019 and 2022. So we've made significant progress, have more work to do, but we're highly focused on that. And we've announced, our commitment to reach a net zero company goal by 2050. So lots of things that we're working on internally, lots of things that we're working on externally to support customers around the world and here in Ontario and broader in Canada that we'll talk about throughout the morning.
Thanks, Lisa. James, I want to go back to you for a second. You said the four-letter word, coal, and it sounds like you've managed to successfully pivot away from coal. I'd love to get all of your perspectives on baseload resources. Obviously, coal has been displaced by natural gas-fired generation assets. What view does natural gas have in the broader energy transition? Will it eventually become stranded, or are you a big believer in some of these abatement technologies that are emerging and advancing?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So firstly, coal in the province of Ontario was not phased out by natural gas. So if you look at the coal generation we had 10 to 15 years ago here in the province of Ontario, 70% of it came from the additional nuclear Bruce Power brought on. And also I see some folks from OPG in the room. Through the return to service of some of our Pickering units, 20% was displaced. So 90% of the coal displacement in Ontario came from nuclear. Another 5% came from additional hydro resources, and the balance, natural gas and some renewables. I think at the end of the day, the issue that we need to confront is that there are no binary or easy answers. It's about building a mix. And I can tell you, if you build an electricity system on solar and wind, you're not going to have the lights in this room on 3/4 of the day. But I'm not knocking wind and solar, because there's attributes to nuclear that are pros and cons. There's hydroelectric that are pros and cons. But we do ourselves a real disservice by suggesting there's absolutes. What we do know is that we can successfully phase coal out, decarbonize, and put a mix in that maintains that reliability, that balance, and that diversity of assets. So for me, it's about having an adult conversation about no absolutes. If we look at global emissions, if we were able to really focus on reducing coal and moving to electrification, that would put the single biggest dent in emissions globally. And it's something we know how to do. We don't need technological innovations to do that. We can do it now. And when you have a clean electricity system, it allows you a foundation to decarbonize other areas of the economy.
I agree with everything James said. A little bit different transition, however, at our company, and I think probably in the United States generally, because we haven't built new nuclear in the US in quite some time. Our company operates 7 nuclear units, all of which were constructed in the 1970s. If you look back at our company, when I started in 2005, that year, we generated roughly half the electricity that we provided to our customers from coal. About 35-40% from nuclear, and then the balance was a little bit of natural gas and a little bit of renewables, mostly hydro. Fast forward to today, we're generating roughly 10% of the electricity that we provide to our customers from coal, and we have announced plans to retire many of our remaining coal units. But we generate now about 40% of the electricity that we provide to our customers from natural gas. And that has been incredibly important to us in our ability to move forward in the clean energy transition. And it gives us the flexibility to layer in a lot more renewables for exactly the reason that James just described, trying to operate this idea, this sort of binary view that either fossil fuels are good or only renewables are good is a false choice. We're going to have to transition thoughtfully to carbon-free sources of electricity. That's going to include nuclear, no doubt. It may include some more emerging technologies, carbon capture and storage, hydrogen, those kinds of things. But the idea that we're just going to walk away from natural gas anytime soon and maintain a reliable and affordable electric grid is a real challenge. So as we think about natural gas, it has been incredibly important to all the progress that we've made so far, and it gives us confidence to be able to make a great deal more progress in that increasingly clean part of our mission going forward.
And I And agree with everything that's been said. Just to echo James's comments a little bit about Ontario. We are 93% plus clean energy here in the province of Ontario. I think we are looked at by many, looked at what we did back between 2005 and 2014, closure of 8 gigawatts of coal on the backs of mainly nuclear and some renewables, some hydroelectric, but largely nuclear. Because of that, we have a clean energy grid. When you talk about renewables are not baseload, they're intermittent by nature. So we see countries that are putting renewables in and need something for baseload. So they're turning away from fossil fuels to gas. We don't believe that that's an appropriate solution towards net zero. We believe that in Ontario, at least, and I think this is conveying throughout the world, that clean energy baseload, if you've got hydroelectric, and you can do that effectively and efficiently, it's certainly a way to go. Other than that, nuclear, we believe that you cannot achieve net zero without baseload of nuclear in jurisdictions where you do not have hydroelectric. I think then renewables and gas is a bridging technology in some cases to help with peaking for peak loads when you need higher gigawatts in hottest days or coldest days of the year. I think gas plays a role there, and certainly in Ontario, it's playing a bridging role until we figure out exactly how we can do that a little bit cleaner. I think it's got a role to play here, but I think we can do that here in a limited way because of our secure base load of hydroelectric and nuclear energy.
Yeah, I think it would just, I'm going to take a step back here. We're so blessed in Ontario with our energy mix. I was at a conference a number of years ago in Spain, and it was a global conference, and I met this woman from Australia. And when she asked me where I was from, I said I was from Ontario, and she said, "Oh my gosh, we're so jealous of your carbon emissions." And it sort of took me back by surprise, or lack thereof, really, because she was referring to electricitymap.org, and we're this big, giant green province smack in the middle of Canada. And when you look at other countries, in Australia in particular, where they're the third highest producer of uranium in the world, but don't use it for energy production, there's a long way to go. So I think it's interesting to me the conversation that starts about the clean energy we have in Ontario. I think James makes a good point, as do the rest of the panelists, about the fact that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. We need it all. And we do ourselves a disservice by thinking kind of in our own lanes, and typically in nuclear, we do that a lot. But there's enough market share for all clean technology. When I think about our gas business, in the near term, there is an opportunity for it to support renewables and stabilize the grid and provide some reliability that's much needed. And we just, from a GE perspective, we're making a lot of investments in a lot of our innovative technologies, advanced nuclear being one of them, state-of-the-art turbines in our gas business being another, hydro, wind, renewables, all of it. But we're really looking at how do we support current and emerging markets from a clean energy perspective. And I think to me, that is the conversation, is what's needed where and when, and how do we best support a carbon-free future.
Thank you, Lisa. Bob, I'm gonna come back to you. I'm also coming from the U.S., and there's a lot of eyes on the country right now, just given the passage of the IRA, which is earmarking nearly $370 billion towards climate-related initiatives. And as part of that, there's a lot of focus on carbon sequestration and hydrogen to enable gas, which is critical in the United States. So I'm curious on your views on both of those technologies. Do you think that bill is really giving them some life? How realistic are they? And when do you think we'll see some of those projects really start achieving commercial operation?
Before I get to that, I do have to correct one thing, because I wouldn't want my friends at the Southern Company to be upset with me. But they have brought a new nuclear unit on in the United States just within the last couple months, and they've got another one not too far behind. So, but that's it in quite some time in the U.S. in terms of new nuclear. So to your question, Ravina, we've looked quite a bit at carbon capture and storage and at hydrogen. On CCS, the technology is real. It's really expensive right now. And the IRA may help with that. As we think about beyond costs, as I think about it, at least our fossil units weren't necessarily built contemplating the storage part of CCS. A lot of the uses for carbon storage so far have been in oil wells, which we don't have any of those close to where our fossil units are. And the idea of building a pipeline, a CO2 pipeline, strikes me as challenging at the moment, just the permitting process associated with something like that. So certainly something that we're looking at. We got to figure out costs and the storage part, I believe. Hydrogen, we've done hydrogen blending in our natural gas system in the places where we operate successfully, up to 5%. We've done pilots, and now we're actually doing that in a part of our system in Utah with great success. So we see opportunities for hydrogen use there that I think can help take advantage of the existing gas grid. Ultimately, I think that's a real advantage there. And then we're also examining blending hydrogen in a gas combined cycle power plant. We're participating in a number of in the U.S., there are Department of Energy grants for hydrogen hubs that I think will really help hydrogen take off and sort of improve the commercial viability. So I'm quite optimistic. I think the Inflation Reduction Act helps. There are some details yet to be worked out associated with how tax credits will apply to hydrogen production. But once those details are worked out, I think there's real opportunities there. I'm not going to try to predict a time frame on that because I'm not very good at it. So our goal is to make sure that we're closely attached to our customers and to the technology, and we'll be able to take advantage of it, we believe, in a timely fashion when it's there.
Thank you. Gary, from your perspective, big EPC contractor, is AtkinsRéalis looking at any mega carbon sequestration, direct air capture, hydrogen projects? And then I promise we'll come back to nuclear because that's the common thread in this theme.
Yeah, my focus is in nuclear, and being relatively new. I've been with AtkinsRéalis for 4 months now, so I'm getting to learn a little bit about all their business. But we're certainly involved in hydrogen projects. I'm not certain that we're involved in any carbon capture projects right now, but certainly in hydrogen, certainly in battery storage. Again, we're serving our clients, right, and looking for opportunities to provide clean energy solutions to our clients, whether they are nuclear, hydrogen, battery storage, etc. That's the business that we're in. So we're open, and we're working on fusion projects in the UK. So we're kind of in all of these spaces to the extent that makes sense, and help our clients achieve net zero goals.
Great, Lisa, I want to take it over to you. A separate question, actually. I want to hear a little bit about your Darling project. You guys are developing the first commercial grid scale SMR plant here in Canada. I'd love to hear a little bit about that initiative.
Sure. So I do want to give a little shout out to my friends at OPG in the audience. We're partnered with Ontario Power Generation, Aecon, AtkinsRéalis to build a BWRX 300. So that's a boiling water reactor. X is the 10th generation, and it's 300 megawatts. And the most feedback I get on that reactor is the acronym. This is something that we're really excited about. We're really excited to be doing our launch project here in Ontario. Ontario, quite frankly, is the perfect environment for a launch project. We have a utility that has a history of excellence in operations, Ontario Power Generation, long history operating nuclear, long history at OPG of successful project execution with the refurbishments, something Gary worked on before he started at AtkinsRéalis 4 months ago. And so when we kind of look at, the utility, the partners that we have with AtkinsRéalis and Aecon, long history in major infrastructure projects. And then, of course, the supply chain that exists. So we were really working for a made in Ontario solution to our components for our project. And the supply chain on Ontario is prime and ready for that, largely because of the work that continued in the nuclear industry for the MCR at Bruce Power and the refurbishment at Darlington. It kept the nuclear supply chain healthy and thriving for many years, where we've seen in other countries where those projects don't exist and the supply chain has dwindled to some extent, but that isn't the case here. In Ontario, we have a supply chain that's excited about new nuclear, so SMRs and other opportunities that are happening at Bruce. And then I think too, the other thing from a project perspective, that things that we're really quite grateful for is the support that we have in Canada for new nuclear. So we have a lot of support from government in a number of provinces. We have support at the federal level, and we're just seeing kind of a new wave that lets Canada step forward as a first for new nuclear. So we're super excited about that, and more to come. Maybe we'll be back next year.
Congrats. You're touching on supply chain. Maybe, James, I'll turn it over to you. We're seeing a lot of challenges in the market right now: rising interest rate environment, inflation, supply chain bottlenecks. How are you managing that at Bruce Power? And what are some of the other challenges that you think the audience should be cognizant of?
Yeah, for sure. So it really goes to Lisa's comment, and obviously I think the SMR project at Darlington is a breakthrough project, not only for Ontario and Canada, but the world. And the world is watching, and we're certainly all supportive of that. It's we talk about different forms of nuclear, large nuclear, SMRs, existing assets. The truth is we need them all. So I'll answer the supply chain question quite simply. 90% of the money we spend as a company and as Bruce Power stays in the province of Ontario. It's a domestic supply chain. So we're not worried about supply chain disruptions. If it's made in Canada, if it's made in Ontario, I know where it's made. We know what the quality is. We know what the standards are. We didn't have the same kind of supply chain disruptions as others during COVID. And I think that's important, in particular, as we're looking at building out. One of the more significant challenges that I would say we have then, a lot of people look at some of these macroeconomic items, and I do agree with Lisa, really strong government support here in Ontario from Minister Smith and the federal government on our equivalent of the Inflation Reduction Act through investment tax credits. But one of the things we need to recognize is all of these projects that we want to build, whether it's lining up the supply chain, getting the generation online, we can't spend 10 years in a regulatory process to put a shovel in the ground. Like during COVID-19, what we learned is we can do things safely with quality in a lean, expeditious way, i.e. produce a vaccine. And we need to take that same urgency in fighting climate change. And as long as we allow these regulatory processes to go on 10 years before you build anything, we are not having the right risk-informed view of this. I could go on and on about that, but that's really the public policy dilemma. But you can't put that entirely on our elected officials. There's a disproportionate amount of pressure that comes from a very small minority of special interest groups and organizations who purport to fight for climate change, which are actually slowing the progress of climate change, whether it's building gas to replace coal or nuclear or all the above. And we can't lose sight of that.
No, it's a great point. I mean, in the U.S., I wish we could say the same. I think about the Champlain Hudson transmission asset, which took 10 years. It was 10 years in the making to receive all permitting and regulatory approvals. Bob, maybe from your perspective, how are you dealing with some of these challenges, whether supply chain related, permitting related, just to get some of these renewable projects up and running?
It's a challenge. But you mentioned one transmission project. We have one in our service territory where we decommissioned a coal plant, and so we needed to build additional transmission. A transmission line that was roughly 11 miles long. We started the permitting process in 2011. We got a permit. We constructed the line, and then a court invalidated the permit. So we don't have a permit today. So we're now 2023 and an environmental impact statement is underway. Now, fortunately, because the line was constructed and energized, we're able to operate it, and our customers are able to not lose their power when we have peak days. But to me, that is an example of the challenges in a permitting process where we're retiring a coal plant, and we're now over a decade to permit a roughly 10-mile transmission line. That kind of process, if it continues, is going to stymie our ability to economically and expeditiously move through the clean energy transition. There were some in U.S. law, some efforts made to improve the permitting process in the Inflation Reduction Act, and those are helpful. But I don't know that they're enough. And to James's point, in the U.S., modernizing the Nuclear Regulatory Commission permitting process is also going to be important. I think broadly from a nuclear perspective, one thing that would be very helpful, I believe, for the industry going forward is less customization and more processes that are repeated the same way over and over again. If you look at plants in the U.S., they're all a little bit customized, and that means challenges in supply chain, and it can mean challenges sometimes in the supply of labor. To the extent that this new generation of reactors are not as customized, I think that will be a great advantage for the nuclear industry going forward. And that's on the industry. I mean, that's something that the industry, and I am less experienced at it than everyone else up here on the stage, but that's something that I have observed, at least with respect to the U.S. industry, when I look at the existing fleet. And then the final thing I'll say is we should not forget about the existing fleet of nuclear reactors. Extending their lives is going to be critical. The idea that we're going to meet any of our climate goals and not continue to operate the existing fleet of nuclear plants is incredibly important. We have a license for 2 of our units from 60 to 80 years. We're pursuing that similar license extension at a few other units. That process also may perhaps take a little bit longer than we would think it needs to. So I think permitting reform and maybe a little less customization in the nuclear side would both be valuable.
Sorry to the discussion there. I think that's one of the key factors in the project that we're working on with Ontario Power Generation. We have a $400 million investment between GE Hitachi, Ontario Power Generation, Tennessee Valley Authority, and Orlen Synthos Green Energy in Poland to standardize our design. So when we think about some of the comments that Bob made about, having plants that are different everywhere, and I think we see that certainly in our Candu fleet here in Ontario, but we want to make sure that when we're commercializing and we're going to market that it's standard and repeatable. It's the fastest way to provide clean electricity is to have a repeatable standard approach. So that is in one of our strategic imperatives with our BWRX 300.
And Gary, from your perspective, how are some of these risks impacting project timelines, EPC contracts? What are you seeing from your perspective?
So when I think about nuclear, and as was said earlier, I was 35 years at Ontario Power Generation and was a big part of the nuclear development program there. And I think we kind of bucketed the key risks into 4 categories: the regulatory process, the impact assessment process, which is way too long for a clean energy solution, in our opinion, and we need to find ways to not cut corners, but be much more efficient in how we go through that process. So that's certainly an area. Another area is fuel supply. You're entering into, whether it's deployment of nuclear plants, you need fuel, and the Candu technology relies on natural uranium mined here in Saskatchewan. The GE technology that was selected because it had a reliable fuel supply. It's the same fuel that's currently being used in BWR reactors throughout the world. There are a lot of promise for other new SMRs, high temperature technologies, et cetera, but many of them are reliant on HALEU fuel. The only manufacturer of HALEU fuel, high assay, low enriched uranium fuel, was Russia. So the U.S. has responded and setting up capability to provide HALEU fuel and other types of fuel for these nuclear reactors. So that is a risk. It's tough to convince somebody to buy into a high temperature reactor right now when we're not certain about where the fuel is going to come from to operate this reactor for 70 years. And so that is certainly something that needs to be addressed. Yeah, I would say that one of the last areas that really we're focusing on, and I think is a big risk, is the capacity to do all this. People capacity, human capacity. As James talked about the supply chain, the Candu reactors, we have natural supply chain here, so that's not a problem. The standardization of Candu throughout the world is pretty common. The core components are pretty common, different size reactors, but common components. So we're able to supply that. We're helping international Candus to do their refurbishments. But people, we've hired 300 plus people in my business so far this year. And that's a 30% increase. And we probably need another 30% before the year's done to meet all the product demands that we have. So it's great news that we're attracting people. But we need to take those experts that have been in our business for a long time and make sure that we're spending the time to teach the new generation of nuclear scientists and nuclear folks coming into our business and prepare them to be ready for these projects. It takes a different approach, right? So, being new to my company, I had a group of 15 new grads in a room, and I asked them why did they join the company. Every single one of them said they want to be a part of climate change, resolving climate change, be a part of a company that's committed to something that can help achieve net zero goals. So their hearts are in it. There's a willingness to be there. We need to help them, educate them, get them ready to be able to take on all these projects in the future. And that's a big challenge, a great opportunity. I love the opportunity to do this, but it's going to take us a little bit of time to get there.
Sure. No, thank you. So supply chain, labor, knowledge, education, attracting talent, fuel supply issues, all of those are very relevant challenges. None of you mentioned capital and accessibility of capital to advancing some of these projects. So I'm curious to get your perspective on, how you feel like you are positioned to be able to tap the market, to be able to access capital to further some of your projects that you're working on.
So I'm happy to start with that. What I would say is that access to capital is primarily driven by the prerequisites you talked about. Strong policy environment, stable regulatory environment, secure supply chain. If you have those core elements in place, capital follows good projects. And I'm not minimizing the hustling you have to do to secure capital, right? But those are fundamentally the prerequisites. I think when you lose any one of those prerequisites, whether it's regulatory uncertainty, whether it's policy uncertainty, supply chain, labor disruptions, then all of a sudden when you're seeking capital, you're having a discussion about what is the risk premium on your project. And so that's important. What I can tell you from a Bruce Power perspective, we have gone out, we issued the first green bond for a nuclear project in the world. I can tell you we were 6 times oversubscribed what we were asking for. So we could have done, there were six times the buyers for every dollar we bonded. So I think capital follows good projects. I think it's when people have to advance projects with all of these areas of instability, and they're the meat in the sandwich. They're stuck right in the middle. They're trying to influence these areas to drive the external stability, and they're trying to please the bankers at the same time. That's an impossible position to be in. And what happens? You just pay a big premium, and it's consumers that end up paying the premium. So,
the one thing I would add to that, underlying everything that James said is the concern about cost overrun risk. We're a regulated utility. So to do anything, to make any investment, we go to our regulators and we make a case. And if the project isn't good because of any of those underlying reasons that James talked about, or if there's fear related to that, then regulatory approval becomes challenging. So sometimes it's not just in our case, it wouldn't just be the ability to access the capital markets. It would be the ability to convince our regulators this is a worthwhile investment on behalf of consumers. And so that issue is very real, and one that we're going to have to spend some time trying to address to make sure that there's comfort among our regulators that this is indeed a good project, that the regulatory process will move on time, that the policy support will stay there, and that the execution of the development, construction, and then operation will go well. So all of those factors are at play, I think, as we sort of think about these kinds of investments.
If you're an investor, you're looking at the recent challenges that many large nuclear projects have had in deploying. We don't need to look far to understand that these projects have traditionally gone long and been significantly over budget in recent history. We are trying to turn that tide and message out that in Ontario, we've got $26 billion of refurbishment projects, mega projects underway that was planned extensively, being meticulously executed, and we can deliver projects ahead of schedule and on budget. That's the message we need to send out. As an investor, look at how we are planning and executing projects and make sure that all those risks that have been brought up are being addressed. And I think we start to open up the door and the opportunity. I know as we approach the GE project, we're going through that rigor in planning to make sure we got a solid project plan that we can execute well to and get confidence of our investors. We look back, not only is the $26 billion, the last 7 Candu plants that we built internationally were done on or ahead of schedule and on budget. So we in Canada and Ontario have demonstrated that we know how to execute projects well and how to de-risk these projects. And we're having those ongoing discussions with investors to explain what it takes to make this happen.
I think I'd just add, that is, if I think about the Ontario project at DNNP, that's one of the reasons that we certainly want to partner with a utility like Ontario Power Generation. That's why we want to work in Ontario. It is the ability to deliver large infrastructure projects on time, on budget. That certainly is our motto for DNNP. And I would say, it also, as a shameless plug, from a GE perspective, our last advanced boiling water reactor was built on schedule, on budget. So I think, we're incorporating all of the lessons that we've learned. We're incorporating lessons that were learned from other projects worldwide where they weren't successful. We're looking at all of those things to make sure that we have it right, and that will support kind of that raising capital piece.
From my perspective, there's a lot of capital chasing these transactions, whether coming from the sustainable finance market, the project finance market, through strategic partnerships, through consumers. There's a lot of capital, but as a bank, we're finding now there's just so many opportunities in this space that we're really having to prioritize, because many of these deals look great from a credit perspective with the right mitigants that you all addressed. But it's just getting harder given the scale and the number of projects that we're seeing.
I have a big deal for you.
Oh, we'll take it. We'll take it. I know. We're a lender. We're open for business. There's my plug, Lisa.
Yeah.
We have about 5 more minutes, and I thought I would just go down the line here and, just hear from all of you if there's, one thing that you could have that could really take your business to the next level and, help achieve net zero sooner. What would it be? Is it policy related? Is it capital related? I'll leave it to you. I don't want to give you any ideas.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think stability is a theme you'll always hear from me, right? And we're so thankful and privileged to live in a democracy where there's a healthy debate. But if you take a step back and you look at public policy, and you take out the day-to-day in the media, we actually agree on about 90% of the solution. And we make the 10% sound like the 90% that we disagree on. And so as much as we can drive unity and consistency and not drive wedges between technologies, not drive wedges between, different policy positions, because that polarized political environment we are in, it ripples into other areas of the economy and other areas. So for me, it's stability, 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 stability of people, stability of policy, stability of regulatory regimes. But I think the colleague that my comment or the comment from my colleague here is a really important is we also have a big part of that within industry. It's not everybody else. We have to also provide that stability and consistency. If we say we're going to do something, we do it. So I know it's a very high level answer, but the word stability is what I'd leave people with.
Thanks, Bob.
James sort of took my answer, but I would have been a little more specific. I think what he said was better, but I would have focused on policy stability. We make investments in infrastructure that's going to be there for decades. And if we're working through a project and then the policy goals or the environment totally change, then the ability to execute that project becomes challenged. And so an understanding, a clarity, and I recognize that there are going to be always bumps along the way. That's expected. But a consistency in the objectives that we are seeking to achieve, that the policymakers are looking for from us, will give that stability, will give us the opportunity to execute at our highest level. And so if I were looking for one thing, it would be that kind of policy stability.
Yeah, I think these two gentlemen are buyers. We are sellers of our technology. So we come from a different perspective here. Of course, we want these nuclear projects to be successful. That's why Canada's so unique. We're actually not talking about nuclear projects. We're actually moving forward with nuclear projects. So we are a partner with GE, Hitachi, and OPG on the BWRX deployment at Darlington. And we need everybody at all levels, whether they're in the project, outside the project, federally, government, etc., to help us be successful because the cause is so enormous. When it comes to my business specifically, in addition to supporting BWRX and other nuclear technologies globally, we are the OEM of Canada's nuclear technology, the Candu technology. We are developing that technology for the next generation. We announced yesterday at a Suppliers Day that we're working on a gigawatt Candu reactor that we hope to have ready to deploy in as early as 3 years from now for in service of large nuclear plants in the mid-30s. So we are going to need lots of help domestically to help make that happen, and we'll need support from all levels of governance and our clients to partner with us and help us achieve this big goal of achieving net zero by 2050. And we want to be part of it.
I like that.
Yep.
Lisa.
They haven't left much on the table for me. I think, if I think about all those things, there's certainly lots of those external factors that are needed. But if I really kind of dig deep on what's actually needed, right now we need proof points. We need, as an industry, to demonstrate that we can do this, that we can deliver on new nuclear projects on time, on budget, in order to make way for other new nuclear projects. So while I'd like, all of the things that these gentlemen have listed for sure, would absolutely help. But I think right now we're in the phase of looking at our accountability along with our partners to deliver on our promise.
James, Bob, Gary, Lisa, thank you all. It's a wrap. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.